The second half of August 1942. In a world of deadly darkness, when all you have is a candle, can you even hope to make a difference? For a few people in 1942, the answer is yes. They are the White Rose. This is War Against Humanity, a sub-series of World War II in real time. I'm Spartacus Olsson. In the first 2 weeks of August 1942, we saw how the Japanese carried out a murderous campaign of retribution on Chinese civilians for the Doolittle raid earlier this year. In the Nazi extermination factories, the deadliest 100 days of the Holocaust raked tens of thousands of lives every day. The evacuations of hundreds of thousands from Leningrad ended as the remaining citizens showed their resilience by shocking the besiegers with a live concert of Shostakovich's 7th Symphony. Now in late August, it is the population of Stalingrad who faced the wrath of the German war machine. Like in Leningrad, the Stalingraders have largely been deliberately left in the way of the advancing enemy because, as Lenin once said, those who do not assist the Red Army in every way and do not support its order and discipline are traitors and must be killed without pity. Words that Stalin will now make very tangible for the 500,000 inhabitants and tens of thousands of refugees from the Western Soviet Union who had sought refuge in the city. They are not informed of the German advance, but start to suspect something by end of July. Factories are being visited by representatives from Moscow tasked with relocating industries to the east, and higher-level military commanders and their families are leaving the city. Local administrators urge Stalin to evacuate factories and civilians. His reply? Where should they be evacuated? The city must be held. That's final. Only those who cannot help with the defenses are to be allowed to cross the Volga, such as children in orphanages, injured soldiers, and non-working women and their children. In effect, around 50,000 wounded soldiers, but only about 8,000 families escape, almost all members of the city and party elite. On August 23rd, the Luftwaffe began pounding the city. On that day alone, the 780 bombers and 490 fighter planes of Luftflotte 4 make 1,600 sorties, dropping 1,000 tons of explosive and incendiary bombs. Klaudia Stepanovka-Denisova, secretary of the Yermansky District Committee, will later testify. There had never been an air raid like that before. It actually looked like the sky was covered with airplanes. There didn't seem to be anywhere that didn't get hit. They started bombing at around 5 or 6. That same night, a lot of places went up in flames. Most of the apartment buildings and institutes, the construction trust, the railway depot, and buildings all the way down to the Volga. Commander General Oberst Wolfram von Richthofen conducts a scouting mission on the 25th and reports a 3,500-meter-high volcano-like cloud rising up from the burning city. They continue for over 2 weeks until the city is reduced to a smoldering pile of rubble. The city almost completely lacks air raid shelters. At least 40,000, maybe many more, die. The City Defense Committee finally decides to start evacuations. Their priority is to save skilled professionals and workers. By September 14th, 315,000 will have been evacuated, again including any remaining party leaders and NKVD commanders. But a group of civilians, roughly the same size, is still stuck between the Germans and the Volga. Their fate is now the same as many other Soviets: resist or die. Throughout Eastern Europe, partisan activity behind the front line has been on the rise. As we have seen so far, the Germans have failed to rout the partisans, but the campaigns have cost tens of thousands of civilians their lives. On August 18, German Führer Adolf Hitler again dials up the murder rates in Führer Directive number 46, saying, "The destruction of the bandits calls for active operations and the most rigorous measures against all members of gangs or those guilty of supporting them." Again, this is a punch in the air against the resistance, but a deadly blow to the civilian population, especially those that are considered Jewish, and that is anyone suspected of opposing the German Nazis, or as Timothy Snyder puts it. The equivalence between Jews and partisans was emphasized over and over again in a downward cycle of rhetoric that could end only when both groups were simply gone. Perhaps it is that immediate threat of extermination that is so very tangible in the eastern parts of Europe that is also giving rise to an active resistance movement. By contrast, in the West, in August 1942, the active resistance to the Nazis is at best a marginal movement. Sure, there are isolated acts of passive resistance. Individuals are beginning to try to hide Jews to save them from deportation and death. In Denmark, most of the Jewish population has been helped to flee across the water to Sweden. In Netherlands, families like Anne Frank's have found safe haven for now through non-Jewish friends. In the French and Belgian countryside, there are groups who have escaped the Nazis and are in hiding with the help of local individuals. There are small, secret presses putting out papers to keep the population informed of the outer world and to issue counter-propaganda. The British Special Operations Executive is constantly stepping up their espionage and sabotage activities with the help of small, but not completely insignificant resistance networks. But overall, it is at this point an infinitely small portion of the population that rises up. Perhaps they lack the courage. Perhaps they feel that it is pointless. Author André Malraux, who has fought against the Francoist forces in Spain and lost, and then again against the Nazi invasion and lost, embodies these sentiments. In the past 2 years, he has often been courted by the fledgling resistance movements to join them. Resistance leader Claude Bourdet will relate how one of these attempts go. To begin with, the writer snorted, one of those powerful and unexpected snorts for which he later became famous, but which at the time impressed me even more. Then he said, "Have you got any money?" It was almost like asking a Christian when he had last seen Jesus Christ. I stammered some kind of excuse, some pitiful explanation. Another snort, another question. "Have you got any weapons?" More stammering, combined with a few hopes in the form of more or less optimistic predictions, vague as to the place, the time, the nature. "All right," said Malraux. "Come back and see me when you have money and weapons." Malraux does not join the resistance. But as I just said, others are using the limited means that are being provided by the Allies. But affiliating yourself with a foreign espionage or sabotage network can be a dangerous game, as you will likely share in their fate if you get caught. We saw that in occupied Czechoslovakia after the assassination of the architect of the Holocaust, Reinhard Heydrich, and now in August, a similar fate befalls a large part of the German resistance. As Astrid has told us in the Spies and Ties series, the Germans have rolled up a massive Soviet signal intelligence network, Die Rote Kapelle, or the Red Orchestra. In that operation, they find the address of several of the German resistance leaders who have been running secret presses and helping the victims of Nazi persecution to get into hiding and out of the country. Until the Rote Kapelle fell, their identities had been completely unknown to the Nazis, but now they are being closely observed by the Gestapo so that they can unwittingly reveal even more of their networks. On August 31st, the first arrest comes when in Berlin, Luftwaffe officer Harold Schulze-Boysen and his wife Libertas are taken into custody. But when one resistance network falls, another one rises. Further south in Munich, a group of students have been coalescing into an active resistance movement at the Munich University. They call themselves the White Rose and have taken upon themselves to inform the German public of the true nature of the Nazi reign. They are students from the middle and upper classes with normal German backgrounds. 3 medical students, Hans Scholl, Alexander Schmorell, and Christoph Probst, are the founders of the group. They've all served tours as medics on the Eastern Front during the past year. Witnessing the atrocities and hearing reliable accounts of the Holocaust, they feel compelled to act, to stir the German people's consciousness. In the second pamphlet of 4 that they have printed until July and are now secretly distributing in Munich and other cities, they write, "Since the conquest of Poland, 300,000 Jews have been murdered in this country in the most bestial way. The German people slumber on in dull, stupid sleep and encourage the fascist criminals. Each wants to be exonerated of guilt. Each one continues on his way with the most placid, calm conscience. But he cannot be exonerated. He is guilty, guilty, guilty." More individuals in Munich and other university cities are now slowly joining the group. Hans Scholl's 21-year-old sister, Sophie, also a student at the Munich University, has started suspecting that her brother is the author of one of the pamphlets and will join the group in coming weeks. All they are doing is putting truth to print and sharing it. They know full well what risks they are taking, or as Sophie Scholl will say in a few months, "What does my death matter if, through us, thousands of people are awakened and stirred to action?" But as we have seen, such awakening is painfully slow, perhaps even futile at this point, and the cogwheels of the Nazi industry of death just keep on picking up speed. It is a machine that depends on initiative, efficiency, and system, which in and of itself can make the suffering even worse. The commandant of Treblinka, Dr. Irmfried Eberl, wants to exceed all his peers in the number of people killed. He pushes the extermination factory's capacity, its 3 gas chambers and its staff of murderers, to its very limits. He has now increased arrivals from 6,000 to 8,000 victims a day to between 10,000 and 12,000. The trains are now so full that thousands already suffocate on the 100-kilometer ride to the factory. One Jewish survivor who was put on work detail in Treblinka gives his account. At night, another transport arrived at the camp. We ran towards the cars. I was shocked. All the cars were filled only with the dead, asphyxiated. They were lying on top of one another in layers up to the ceiling of the freight car. The sight was so awful it is difficult to describe. There was nowhere to place the corpses. Near the railroad tracks were large piles of clothing, and under these were still unburied bodies. We laid the bodies in layers near the railway. Occasionally moans could be heard from under the piles of clothes as people recovered consciousness and asked in a weak voice for water. There was nothing we could do to help. We were dying of thirst ourselves. The peaceful ruse designed to manipulate arrivals into thinking it is a labor or transit camp and that they are just going to take a quick shower falls apart. People exiting the trains, those who are still alive, are filled with terror as they see where they have arrived. Guards fire into the crowds in an attempt to control them as they are herded towards the gas chambers. By August 28th, 245,000 Jews from the Warsaw Ghetto and surrounding areas have been killed in Treblinka, as well as 51,000 from the Radom district and 16,500 from Lublin district. 5 weeks of killing, yielding 312,500 dead. The small crew of guards can't handle the situation anymore. Some victims escape, and dozens of freight cars filled with humans go unloaded, causing even more to suffocate to death slowly inside the sweltering, overloaded cars. On several occasions, the engines providing the gas for the 3 chambers break down. The people inside have to wait, crammed together, naked, unable to move, sometimes for hours until the engines start again, and they are dead. In the last week of August, Odilo Globochnik, in charge of Operation Deinhard, and Christian Wirt, inspector of Bevchich, Sobibor, and Treblinka, visit the facility to see for themselves what is going on. Faced with what can only be described as Armageddon within the circles of hell itself, even these veteran mass murderers are furious and relieve Eberl of his responsibility. Franz Stangl, the former commandant of Sobibor, takes over at Treblinka. Not to scale back the operation, but to increase capacity to handle the tens of thousands of Jews that the Nazis still want to murder here. Arrivals to Treblinka will temporarily be halted to clean up the grounds and clear the backlog, and construction begins to expand the facility from 3 to 10 gas chambers. But how do you clean up the murder of hundreds of thousands? The millions of dead human beings create a macabre problem for the Germans and their henchmen. A buried corpse will rot, bloat, and produce noxious gases. Already last summer, in the huge mass graves of the Einsatzgruppen killing pits, this caused the ground to heave and collapse like a slowly undulating ocean of decay. The gases erupted out of the ground, permeating the killing grounds in a permanent stench of death. Right after the Wannsee conference in January, foreseeing the even bigger problems this would create in the killing factories and fearing poisoning the groundwater, Heydrich ordered one of the main perpetrators of the mass murders of 1941, Paul Blobel, to find a solution and start a cleanup operation, Sonderaktion 1005. These past weeks he has been in Kemlo, where killing operations have been temporarily halted. Here, forced laborers, Jewish men in heavy chains, have to exhume the tens of thousands of bodies to find ways to cremate them, despite the advanced decomposition. Now, in August, Blobel has perfected his method. Pile up the dead on railway sleepers and other wood, fatter people and women who naturally have more subcutaneous fat and will burn more fiercely at the bottom, and then gasoline to set it all ablaze. So far, the shining spotlights of resistance are far too few, far too dim to outshine the floodlights of a world ablaze with fires, destroying forever millions of lifetimes of labor, love, laughter, and sorrow. Never forget.